Hello, hello, hello. Taking a little bit of a break from writing and applying to jobs. Thought I'd go ahead and make a video today. Sorry, it's a little odd that I have to drink at the beginning of every video. It might be a recurring theme. No, I mean, it's a little hard applying for jobs because, most of the times you don't get calls back. Sometimes people aren't really in a hurry to hire anybody. So, I have, a lot of requests that are pending. And then, the occasional person will email me back saying, hey, we've decided to go with somebody else. Because some of the jobs that are available, I don't really qualify for. And then the ones I do just are really fucking slow to respond. So it gets a little frustrating. And I've been working on a book in my downtime. And since I have a lot of it, I'm almost done with it. I have the rough draft finished, and now I'm on the second draft, where I am going through, making additions, making changes, possibly looking for things to get rid of, double, triple, quadruple checking that what I'm writing is making sense. The biggest problem that I have is that things are a little bit repetitive. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm not constantly reiterating the same things over and over again, but that's kind of how I talk about things. So maybe it's just going to be the case that I will have some repetition. Maybe that's just more common in books than I realize. But regardless, right now I have about 100 pages worth of content. I foresee that very quickly and very easily going to 150 plus as I continue to make additions, as I continue to expand on things, as I continue to give real examples. The book is about management. And I'm really excited for it because it's the first book that I've written where so far anybody who's gone through my rough draft, particularly my fiance, has said hey, this one is kicking a good bit. This one is resonating. This one I feel like a lot of people will enjoy. She said she really enjoyed reading it. The other two she didn't really. One of them she didn't really get. The other one I don't think she's even read yet because she has other books she wants to read and she's usually at work a lot of the time, and reading isn't something that she wants to feel like a chore. And to be honest, I don't want to make her read it. I have 2 sales this month, so I'm excited. So the topic for today, while it's on my mind because I've been writing about it pretty continuously for the past few days, actually for the past few weeks, is about management and leadership and why society kind of sucks because of it. The biggest thing for management for me and authority, and I think this is comparative, and this is what I think this is what I was trying to, one of the things I was trying to say in my first book, but the more I write about it, the better I am at verbalizing it. So I think as I continue to make books, the books will continue to get better because it won't be so vague, or it will be a lot more specific. It won't be a lot of extra colorful language to basically make something sound smarter than it actually is. It won't be struggling to talk over my own words to get my points across. But basically, anytime that there's authority, right? I've experienced this when I wore a police uniform. I experienced this when the difference of being a normal deputy to being a corporal to being a normal deputy again. I've experienced this based on being the same fucking rank and just wearing a slightly different colored shirt. One that indicated that I did less dangerous work. I've experienced this when I wore a vest that indicated that I was on a special response team and had additional training. My personality didn't change, and over time, my experience grew. And I would argue, from an inmate's perspective, particularly one who wanted to evaluate me as how potentially dangerous I could be, I would argue that I haven't gotten so fat to the point to where I was so easily dismissed. I got bigger, I got stronger. I got a little bit slower, but I was still fast enough. My technique for restraining people got better. My technique for dealing with physical conflict got better over time, and that's just because of your experience. But perception mattered a lot. The authority that you have, the appearance of authority that you have, really changed how people view you. When I was a normal deputy, people respected me a little bit because I was bigger. When I wore the SRU vest, fucking big difference in people. People just assumed that I was just slamming out backs. When I became a DS2, I would wear my jailer uniform again, and like the assumptions about me went back down. But then occasionally I would wear my nice uniform, and all of a sudden I have more respect for you now. When I was a corporal, those fucking 2 stripes on your shirt, people just assume that you know everything. People assume that you're highly competent. People thought that I was probably the most dangerous person in the fucking room when I was a corporal. I was kind of a rock star. When I stepped back down, I went on outside detail. Exact same, I was DFC, technically a higher rank than I was when I was a deputy. But I wore a yellow shirt. It was a reflective shirt. That was intimidating. And then people just completely started dismissing me again. Then I wore my normal uniform and people took me seriously again. And it was just all over the place. I think the way that we adhere to appearances and authority and rank kind of cause a lot of problems, because when you have a position of authority, you have a responsibility to make sure that things are happening. And because you have that responsibility, people kind of disproportionately treat you with respect, especially because you have the capacity to give them consequences to their actions. And when you can give somebody consequences to their actions, and you can really, really convince them of that, the way that you are treated is differently. To a point to where I just kind of lose respect for people, I guess is a way to put it. I don't like it. And I don't like appearances. I don't like how appearances matter to so many people, because to people, appearances mean a lot. It shows that you care about things. It shows that you're putting effort into things, because people extrapolate a lot of things from just how something looks. And because of that, people who don't care that much about appearances are more easily dismissed. People who care about appearances but don't really have a lot to say, aren't really that smart, aren't really that interesting, or aren't even really that good at their jobs, get more respect sometimes. And I'll get into that. If you suck at your job, people will just say that you suck at your job no matter how good you look. But you can suck a little bit more, be kind of average, and people will just, their perceptions just increase. And I don't like that, because I'm somebody who likes to be lackadaisical. I like to dress however I want to dress to feel comfortable. I look at my uniforms for work, and what I need to wear for work is merely that, just what I have to wear. I'm not somebody who, I've worked around a lot of rednecks, enough rednecks. I've been around enough people to where that weren't really the smartest. I've been around a lot of foreigners who worked really hard and put in a lot of effort to not really get a whole lot of respect. And it's just kind of an unfortunate reality for me, because I know that I know that there are people who have a lot to contribute to society that really aren't given that opportunity because of appearances. We care about criminal records, so if you have a criminal record, you appear to be a less valuable person. Even though people won't say that, you're not valued as much for things like being considered for jobs. even if your crime is minimal, is preferable. You're valued more if you have a college education, even if your college education has nothing to do with the work. Or even if you weren't a good student, because people don't care what grades you made in school. They just care that you have that fucking piece of paper. Effort is diminished because of the view of appearances to a point to where we care about the pieces of paper. We care about the haircuts. We care about the groomed appearances. We care about everybody looking their best 24/7 to the point to where you go to the grocery store and some people look like they're fucking trying to get in a photo shoot. Because that's what we value. And we value the appearance so much that translates to our authority figures. And it's translated to, well, because they are in that position, they're obviously more important. Or because they're in that position, they're obviously smarter. Or because they're in that position, they are obviously more competent, or they deserve to be there. Or they're the best person for it, especially if they can have a straight face. Like the amount of times that people have thought that I was ready to kick the shit out of them, or that I was fully capable of taking them on to a fight, or that I was better at my job simply because I had a straight face. Because I have RBF. This is my face most of the time. And so, in a conversation, right, it seems like I know more, or that I'm more confident, or that I'm not scared, or that all of these things that, sometimes you can be in a situation where you might be scared, and people won't admit it, because it's not a manly thing to admit. But there are some oh fuck me moments that you can get into that you just gotta right through it, right? And because of that appearance, people back down. And that's why I view people that care about appearances to that extent. I view it as cowardly, but I don't know if I necessarily want to. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word. I think of it as foolish. I think that. I think of it as like the reptiles, that the ones that have the things that go around their heads, the patch of skin, and they just run at you. And they don't know what they're doing. They can't actually do anything to you, and they look kind of silly. If you actually ever watch a video, because they don't run like a human. They just kind of waddle really quickly. But it's such a shock. Where you're just oh, and then most things run away, because, or the bear that actually is dangerous, that might be intimidated because you make yourself look bigger and you don't back down. And the bear's oh shit, why isn't he backing down? And it makes people second guess themselves. I think it's the flaw in human psychology that's reminiscent of our survival instincts. And I think a lot of our problems and a lot of the things that we have are reminiscent of. I don't think that they're reminiscent of our survival instincts, but they're reminiscent of our culture. And I think that we're too quick to accept things because of the position that somebody might be in, or we're too quick to reject things because you either will listen to authority or you will ignore anything that any authority figure ever tells you, and there's no real rational evaluation of what's being told. And so because of that, authority, in my opinion, is either overly criticized or not criticized enough. It is either not questioned or it is the most questioned thing ever. And it is either the most noblest of thing that you can have or the most demonized thing you can have. And I think that translates to our politics. It translates into our leaderships. It translates into our management, into businesses. And it's all about maintaining appearances, and it's all about maintaining that social structure and that hierarchy to a point to where you either overly reject it, i.e. me, to a point to where it can negatively affect your life, or you overly accept it, i.e. probably most people, to the point to where problems don't really get solved, because sometimes there are policies and procedures and statements that managers say that kind of need to be challenged a little bit. And I think that them being the ones in that position, we confuse that position with them being right. And I think that's what bothers me the most from when I went into adulthood, because one of the things that I struggle to really reconcile with, now that I have this time to think about myself and to think about why I have problems with things and why I get so angry about things and what I need to do to better function in society. You know, one of the things that was a disappointment for me that I didn't realize was a disappointment until I was actually able to verbalize it was the disappointment in the fact that it doesn't matter how right you are. Because it doesn't. It doesn't matter how right you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how hard you work. Because the appearance matters more. It matters more that you can convince somebody you work hard than you can actually work hard. It matters more if you can take an average amount of work and make it appear to be like it's more work, or make it seem more important than it actually is. Because if you do 1,000,000 tasks and you don't say anything about it, people may not know the efforts that you have or that you've put forth. And if you do a couple of tasks, but you say things about it, then people have no choice but to recognize that you've done things. And so that's why it's so important to state the things that you've done, to state your opinions, and to make your mark in other people's minds. Because it's all image-based. And I think that's the biggest disappointment for me, because I've always been the kind of person, you know, when I was a teenager, and I've had teachers that would tell me things that were wrong, for purposes that I'm not going to get into. It's not one of those situations where I thought I was smarter than the teacher, but the situations that you might have experienced where teachers weren't necessarily being fair to students, or if you've had the experience of laws impacting education, you have things kind of being taught to you in very specific ways because that's what the law says, as opposed to what is actually true, or anything that's actually resembling education. And it gets pretty messy. Or I've had teachers that were just outright disrespectful to students, and one that was outright disrespectful to me, but I was wrong because I was the student. So too were inmates wrong when I worked in the jail because they were inmates. And a lot of times I had to tell them that, you know, hey, ultimately you have to remember, no matter how right you are, you're an inmate. So the moment you start being stupid, they're just going to dismiss whatever you have to say. But if you're respectful and you keep saying it and they ignore it and you file a grievance and you do it officially, then they have no choice but to listen to it. And I had to remind people of that, and I had to tell people of that, and sometimes the way they went about it worked, and sometimes it didn't, because they were just easily dismissed and hand waved away. And so too, like, was I frustrated because I was a deputy, and when I was a deputy, I wasn't allowed to be right if my supervisor contradicted me, no matter how much more correct I was, because their position of authority made them more right, just like my position of authority made me more right than the inmates, and vice versa. And that's why I didn't like their respect. I kind of liked it. I liked feeling like an important person sometimes when I walked in the room when I was a supervisor, but I felt bad because I felt like people felt like they had to be nice to me, or felt like they had to respect me, or felt like they had to go above and beyond to impress me, or to make me think better of them. And it got to a point where I told people, I said, don't call me sir. I call everybody else sir. Don't call me sir. If you want to call me corporal, that's fine. But I would prefer you call me Zonic, because I want you to, I want to have that, at least an illusion of me attempting to take your point of view objectively. Because I felt like that, being treated like that authority figure, would prevent me from being objective, because referring to what I wanted just because of my position felt too much. Not like a responsibility I couldn't handle, but it didn't feel fair. And it felt like it was too easy for me to dismiss people just because I didn't like them, or too easy. I could very easily see myself just like not doing something just because I didn't like somebody on shift, or making somebody's day harder just because I didn't like them. And I wanted to emotionally remove myself from the situation, which is why I told them, I tried to make it a more generic interaction. But I was disappointed because, like when I was a teenager, like in my early adulthood, like in my like in my middle 20s, and like in my late 20s, it's not everybody agrees with that. Some people want the royalty treatment for the positions that they have, to ultimately be disappointed when they no longer hold that position because they've been grown to expect respect rather than earn it. And I've always wanted to be somebody that earned people's respect. I don't always earn people's respect, and I know people respect me for reasons that I haven't earned, but I at least wanted to feel like I was earning some people's respect. I don't want to avoid my problems because of my worry of appearance, because it is my worry of appearances when I leaned into it. Whenever I lean into worrying of appearances, I wasn't able to address the problems I had because I wasn't allowed to be depressed, or I wasn't allowed to have some mental health issues I need to work on, or I wasn't allowed to say that I might have an alcohol problem, or I wasn't allowed to say X, Y, or Z, right? Because everything was about appearance. And that's why I don't like it. And that's why I don't like society. That's why I don't like authority. Because authority is nothing but an appearance thing. It's very rarely people in a position that are just trying to make sure things are getting done. Because the dynamics of having that authority are very easily abused, right? Like it's like what you hear alluded to constantly in our media, right? It's why there are moments in our art that's very powerful when it refers to this, right? The Watchmen had the quote that was a reference to, what was the name of the writing? It was like from 200 or 300 AD or something like that. I think it was like satires, where it was who watches the watchers, or who guards the guardsmen, or the original Latin like has a couple of rough translations to it. Or, the fucking something as simple as Spider-Man, Ben Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. The more power that you have, the more responsibility you should have. But people don't always feel the need to be responsible for their power, which is why I'm so fast to criticize it and to point a finger back at it and to basically say, hey, you need to make sure that this is right. Because when I was a deputy, I did wrong things. Not like illegal things or immoral things, but there were times where I wasn't being fair to people. And, it spoke to me when inmates would point to me and say, you need to be fair. You're not being fair right now. You are the authority figure, are somebody who is giving us reason to not respect your authority right now. And you need to fix it. However you need to fix it, even if it's something as simple as an apology or an admission. And sometimes that's too much. Sometimes it's too much for us to ask our leaders and our managers and our bosses to admit that they were wrong. And I think that's a problem. I think it's a problem. I think there are a lot of relationships like that, where it's too much for one person to simply say, I was wrong when I did this. And I think that's why arguments will continue for things like that. And it's kind of silly to me. Like, looking at it from the outside, like, as a person, I get it. But trying to be objective about it, like, taking my brain and sticking it outside of my human body and pretending like I'm not a human, or looking at it through the lens of, like, a dog. If a dog, like, had consciousness but wasn't necessarily, like, humanized or, like, made to be the exact same way as a human, still had the perspective of a dog. Like, they would find that silly. And they'd be like, you're so smart, but I feel like you're just being dumb right now. And that's how I feel a lot of the time, because of images, because of how we perceive things. It's silly. It's kind of stupid. Or maybe it's just me not being able to make peace with it yet. I don't know. Maybe part of my journey is learning to make peace with things that, while they don't make sense, there's always going to be something that doesn't make sense. And maybe I just need to accept that. Maybe it just needs to be challenged more to a point to where it does change. Maybe I'm just trying to look at it from the lens that makes sense to me, but I'm not willing to understand it because I'm so stuck in my ways. Only time can really tell.